And the fun continues. Happy Friday. Happy South by. Welcome to everybody who has just joined us here in the Comcast Social Media Lounge. We are thrilled to have you. If you love what you're hearing today, please tweet us. Hashtag Comcast SXSW and use the hashtag South by Southwest. Thank you. We love you in advance. We were just talking up on stage about creatives and career pivots, and I mentioned I wrote my book to answer the question, what's next? Well, our next guests are here to have a conversation about now what? What do you do when you know the audience? What can brands do to push the conversation forward even further? So I am thrilled to introduce Dean Lucente. He's the Senior Director of Advanced and Programmatic Media Solutions at Comcast, and Brent Gaskamp, Vice President of North American Development in the Videology Group. Welcome, Brent and Dean. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
So I'm dying to know, now what?
I think it's a great question, right? The conversation and the dialogue today, the discussion today is going to be around as companies have spent a lot of money to understand and research their current customer base and to look for new prospects. You know, what do they do now with that information, and how do they align that appropriately with advertising so that they can get the results that they want? And it's kind of a heady discussion, but we tend to try to make it more fun. Brent and I have known each other for a while, so we're going to have more just a discussion around it.
Nice.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for being
Appreciate
here.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Dean's spot on. I think the last 5 years have been a phenomenal change, I think, for many aspects of both the media industry and brands. So we have consumers consuming content and consumption of content on more devices and in more places than ever before. We have brands that have a better understanding of who their audiences are than they've ever had before. But managing that complexity, I think, is really it's a hard job, right? And I think today we want to talk a little bit about, the next 5 years and how brands are going to take what they know now and what they know about media and its distribution and bring it together in ways that really, drive home results and success for them.
It seems like Nate Silver's book, Separating the Signal from the Noise, that there's so much noise now, and in good and bad, but there's so much information, and you're right, consumers are consuming everywhere. Content is embedded everywhere, so how do you stand out?
Well, and that being part of Comcast, we've actually not only embraced but enabled the whole idea of fragmentation. As the consumer looks to get and has a voracious appetite to consume video and to consume programming, we've gone out of our way to make sure that they can access programming and access video wherever they are, whenever they are, whether it's in their home on a traditional cable base or national broadcast base, or whether it's on the go. And we've done that and embraced it, and I think that's part of the interesting dynamic. So how does a broadcast and publishing company then take that information and knowledge and work with partners in order to then work with agencies in order to help brands achieve their goals? I think that's the hardest part.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of complexity out there because you've got, in some cases, media as it's been for the last 50, 60 years with still the ability to buy age and gender demographics around prime time and other placements. And then you've got this whole new, emergence of what I would say ad tech 1.0 15 years ago with Google and others coming into the market, offering search and display, bringing a more granular level of targeting, but probably a more granular level of targeting more towards the bottom of the funnel. And I think one of the things that Dean and I want to explore here today is really how does a brand look at themselves more holistically when you look at kind of upper funnel brand activities all the way down to kind of lower funnel direct response. And our point of view from a videology perspective is that brands are ultimately managing KPIs of success, and in many cases, the systems and the technologies being used are not representative of that today. And so my point of view today is going to be a little bit about how we're leveraging technology and math and science to approach that. And I think Dean's got some great insights on the Comcast side as well.
Yeah, we're not going to dive deep here today. We're over at the Departure Lounge, Guadalupe and Fifth, right at that corner. So we've got a Departure Lounge there, the Comcast Departure Lounge, where we can dive in deep and have a really more thorough understanding. But at the top line, there's a lot of money being spent where very little information is being garnished. And whether you want to call that broadcast advertising or TV advertising, there's a lot of money being spent there. And there's not a lot of data, or not as much data as when you look at from a lower funnel perspective on the DR side. And so what we've been able to do together is actually look at across that entire funnel, and we've got case studies that have proven this out, but look across that entire funnel in order to pull the data and all the intriguing information from the DR side and pull that up to inform where the big money's being spent.
I'm curious, even the perspective that you're both sharing is about staying current and staying ahead of the trend and being willing to change how you advertise and how you work with both consumers and I would imagine customers. How do you stay agile as such a large organization in doing this and within your role specifically?
Well, for me, within Comcast Media 360, so I'm within the Spotlight group within Comcast, and underneath that Spotlight umbrella, which is a huge organization, huge sales and marketing organization. But fortunately, I'm within Comcast Media 360, and that group is an incubator group. That group is funded purposefully to take chances, to take risks, calculated risks, but risks nonetheless in order to understand where is the next endeavor that we should be looking at in order to not only fulfill on the consumer's needs, but to fulfill on the brand's needs.
Yeah, and I think for us as a technology company, the major difference probably is the fact that we have customers who are at so many different points along the path. I would say we have customers that are on the bleeding edge, pushing the envelope, and being some of the most progressive media organizations in the world. And you have others that are like, I want to sit still and stay here as long as I can. And I kind of call that the AOL dial-up problem, right?
Yeah.
Which is like, how long do I keep these subscribers on dial-up? And I think that we're starting to see that the disruption that's happening in that thinking is that new players and new entrants in the market are starting to affect some of those core legacy revenues, and it's really pushing the market. So I think you've got some that are kind of trying to pull it along, and then you've got others that are being pushed. And we try to, we have to maintain a balance there for sure. I mean, there's things that we're working on that probably won't be mainstream for the next 7 years. But to have that type of a lead time to test, evaluate, run those products and services with clients before the market matures is actually not a bad thing from our perspective, as long as we keep the revenue coming on the core business and are able to continue to invest there.
But you bring up a great point, right? And I think the confusion or misconception is that in order to pivot and in order to be part of the disruption, you have to really thoroughly disrupt it. And that's not what we're finding. What we're finding is it's a balance. It's a balance with working that which is already working, or the old school, with the medium school and the new school, right?
Yeah, totally.
How do you combine them and work in a very agile understanding of what's important to them, right? That's what I think our partnership has really delved into. We work with some traditional and we work with some, brand spanking new technologies in order to come up with answers.
It's so refreshing to hear, because I'm often giving advice to solopreneurs, people like me who kind of run a one-woman or one-man shop. And I say the same thing. Use what's working to incubate the pilots, the tests. And so it's really cool to hear even a company as large as Comcast is doing this. And I love what you said about taking those traditional and leveraging that. There's nothing wrong. You don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater on that.
Right.
But you use that to incubate the medium school and the new school. And I'm curious if either of you would be willing to share any trends that you can share, any of those pilots, or you mentioned some new things coming that may not hit the market for 7 years. I would love to know what some things you're most excited about on this front.
Well, I think, we started this conversation talking a little bit about brands, and I think, from our perspective, we're starting to see brands get much smarter about how they're managing their entire portfolios. I'd say, two really great examples. We work with a lot of what I would call halo brands that own hundreds of sub-brands underneath them. And those sub-brands are all out looking at data. They're looking at the media that they want to buy against that data and insights to inform them, but they're not necessarily looking at that data compared to the other brand under the halo. And so what we're finding is that a lot of these brands have been investing in the same consumer with like products across their portfolio and spending a tremendous amount of money. And so to put that all into a unified system or platform, to have a full portfolio level view, they get a better understanding of where their investments are overlapping, what consumers overlap within their own, family ecosystem. And I think we're starting to see brands, instead of operating in silos, of the sub-brands, they're looking at it more holistically, driving efficiencies in media spend. And I think at the end of the day, they're also seeing a lot of positive return from consumer feedback because it's enhancing the consumer experience with their association with the brand as well.
Yeah, we've been able to break down a lot of the silos, and in doing that, we've got really specific examples, whether it's a luxury auto or whether it's a CPG, consumer packaged goods, and we have those over at the Departure Lounge on Guadalupe and Fifth. And those will actually dive deep into why and how we've broken down those silos and what we've looked at from a partnership perspective in order to do a better job of understanding the consumer and filtering that up to the brand to meet that brand ROI.
Awesome. Yeah, it is fascinating to think about the Halo brand and the sub-brands, and even now from the consumer perspective, looking at a website here, seeing an embedded ad there, seeing then the video there. Like, it's really fascinating to see it from both sides and even get used to it. Even get used to, like, oh, the company that was just advertising is following me. But it's becoming a way that we coexist now in this environment.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing around the connective tissue, right?
Yeah.
What is the right connective tissue in order to make sure that you're properly acting as an advertiser to a consumer, and as us as the middlemen, how we're properly conducting that dialogue and deciphering what is the more important audience to receive the message at what time.
Yeah, great. So we have just 1 minute left, and I would love to hear what's the most important thing that you think people should know on this front about the future of brands and advertising while they're here at South by. What should people keep in mind?
I think, I think starting off with your first panel, change is good.
Yeah.
And I think that
much as we might resist it,
I think it is. It's not about always going all in, but it's about putting the toe in the water, putting the foot in the water.
You could have written my book.
Let's get started. Let's get started. Let's look at it through a different lens, and let's understand how the brand can react to this new world of media. And I think the ways of the market are changing and evolving so fast that if you don't try to test, innovate, and reinvent yourself, there's been a lot of great companies that have been left behind in the past.
It's so true.
I think change is the only constant.
Yes.
That if you are not willing to change and embrace what is actually happening and start to lead that charge, that you'll be left in the dust. And that it'll be very Darwinian on who falls off and when they do. And I think that that's what's been really fun about being part of Comcast.
Absolutely.
We tend to do both, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah, I say in my book, if change is the only constant, then let's get better at it.
Yeah.
So Dean, Brent, thank you so much for being here with
Jenny.
me. And remind us one more time where people can find you for the rest of the conference.
Guadalupe and Fifth.
Yeah.
Guadalupe and Fifth. It
All
is
right.
the Comcast Departure Lounge.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you both so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for
you.
coming up. Awesome. All right, Brent, Dean, let's give him a round of applause. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Woo. Extra round of applause. All right, thank you. Welcome. Again, hashtag Comcast SXXW. It's really hard to say. Try saying that spelled out. Comcast South by Southwest, hashtag South by Southwest. And thank you. We'll be back in a few.